What is up, fellow Doomies? Welcome to my Doom Patrol Season 4, Episode 4 breakdown, recap, and review. This is called Casey Patrol for kind of obvious reasons, because it brought the character of Casey quite literally to life. Now, I know I'm a day late again this week. I actually didn't know if I would have time to get this video out because I've been pre-recording some content for over the Christmas period, but luckily I am here. I'm here to make my thoughts known on this episode of Doom Patrol, and even with that said though, I don't know how long this video will be because it was a much shorter episode, around 42-ish minutes, and it was a bit more of a straightforward episode of Doom Patrol without even the Doom Patrol in it. Now, that's not me putting down the episode, it's just I don't know how much there is to say compared to, like, you know, going from Jane to Cliff to then Larry and Keeg and what's going on there. But that being said, I still really enjoyed this episode. I feel like some people might be like, you know, I watched the Doom Patrol for the Doom Patrol, but, you know, it's not like Danny the Street or Danny the Ambulance in this case and the Dannysons, Morally Corrupt all the way back to Season 1. It's not like they haven't been integral parts of the show in many episodes before, and not to mention Abby Monterey's Dorothy Spinner. So it felt great to revisit Dorothy because the last time I think we saw her was after she went off with the Dead Boy Detectives, and don't forget that we are actually getting a Dead Boy Detectives show, so look forward to that. But overall, this episode, it was kind of, you know, a little self-contained adventure for Dorothy, Morally Corrupt, I suppose the Dannysons, but mainly Dorothy, because as Morally Corrupt says, you need to kind of go off and have some adventures of your own, or at least if you can't talk to me about whatever's getting you down, you need to find somebody that you can trust, and as we saw at the end of the episode, and well, throughout the episode, that was Casey. And now Dorothy is driving off into the sunset with Casey all the way to Cloverton. So you can bet your ass that we'll be seeing Casey and Dorothy again. And we've got some comments from the showrunner on that a little bit later. But overall, in terms of this episode as a story, I really do agree with what Jeremy Carver told Entertainment Weekly, in that it was very important to us and Tom Farrell, the episode writer, to go above and beyond this episode to show that the struggle very much continues and it's ongoing. Even the safe space isn't always entirely safe. I think we were just trying to convey that there's a certain beauty in a character and a place like Danny, but what I call the veil that you pass through to get into Danny is a very thin filament between safe and not safe. That's what we were hoping to express along with everything else. And that's exactly what this episode was foreshadowing right at the beginning, with how Morally Corrupt was already saying, where it's like we're reaching maximum capacity, there's loads of people seeking that safe space with Danny. We saw at the very beginning of the episode, there's quite a bit of hate out there in the world, with them spray painting hateful messages on the wall, but then later on, they find somebody else spray painting, and they were just trying to help out, which kind of makes you think, you know, maybe there is a place in the real world that we can help secure and make a better place, not only for us, but for other people. And that growth does indeed come, because not only will Danny always be a safe space for those who need it, but we're gonna see these characters, I mean, that's if we get future seasons, obviously, but they're gonna try and live in the real world. As Morally Corrupt said, there's still good people in the world, and they're gonna have to start living in it if they're ever gonna want to change it. And there's always, you know, very wholesome messages whenever it comes to Danny's and storylines, if you will. But let's get on to the other side of things. The whole Torminox storyline. I absolutely really love this, because it's one of those things where you have this, and I also thought it was so artfully done, so creatively done, given that, you know, Casey Brinke Space Case is a comic, as you guys know, and in this episode they actually did these little moments which transitioned from reality over to the comic book, where we were getting Casey's backstory to Torminox's backstory and how he was once is her father, but then there was that incident that caused him to become the villain that she's faced 143 times and destroyed. So there's all this typical kind of bizarre absurdity to, I'm like, oh my god, look at Torminox, look at these metal flying flies that are taking over the Dannysons. But what I'm trying to really get to, when you just see all this weird wackiness, it was still a very Doom Patrol episode without the Doom Patrol in it. You have this absurd alien-looking villain come into the story, but then with Casey also coming into the story, it turns into more of an underlying emotional thing going on, because now Casey's been brought to life. By the way, I absolutely loved the cheesy comic book lines, or as Jeremy Carver said, the comic book bravado. There's so many moments which, and it's obvious as to why she's acting like that, because in those comic books, just like a lot of comic books, there is especially back in the day, a lot of cheesy dialogue. So one thing that comes to mind is like, they're called the Vectra, or when she was eating food. I thought Madeline Zima, I think that's how you pronounce the second name, did a fantastic job as well. I actually haven't seen her since David Duchovny's Californication, which I absolutely adore that show. It's hilarious. So seeing her pop up again, I was like, oh, hello. But again, once you get through all the comedic aspects of this, with Casey being brought to life in actual reality, you don't always, or should I say, I suppose Casey's character in the comics they don't always write in scenes where she knows what hunger is like. It's like, oh, I'm eating food, but now she's in the real world. I have a sense of smell. That smells amazing. I want to eat. And then in the real world, there is actual real consequences. So in a comic book, sure, even though ironically this is a fictional show, but within the canon of this show, she is a fictional character. Now she's in the real world. Within a comic book, she can kill her dad 143 times, and the writer or the artist can always just create a new story with him coming back. But now it's just like, well, damn, like my dad might not come back. And there was some really well portrayed scenes here, acted scenes, even between the alien looking Torminox and Casey, where things got very, very touching. Even if Morally Corrupt almost broke me out of it a few times, just only through making me laugh through calling him nicknames like Tampax. Now, the most interesting part of all of this is Torminox's mission, and that's because this whole time, Torminox was seeking Dorothy's amulet, or should I say Niles' necklace. Now, we start off the episode with that story, which we find out isn't actually true. Dorothy this whole time has, ever since Niles Caulder passed away, hasn't even engaged with her imaginary friends. She's actually locked them away because any time spent with them is too painful, as it reminds her of her father. So she never actually got to speak to Niles and say all the things that she wanted to say. All of this is kind of really sad, especially if you've seen the whole of Doom Patrol and that journey in season 2 and season 3 and whatnot. But the interesting thing about that necklace, don't forget, is just like what happened with Rita and how her necklace was filling up, and it's like they're collecting immortality or something. And you can see from the promo of next episode that without this emotional juice that was in Rita's necklace, she seems to be aging, and we'll go over that promo a little bit more at the end of this video. Well, Niles Caulder's necklace kept him alive that whole time, and the whole reason he created that necklace, as we learned in previous seasons, is so he could just live one more day than Dorothy, so he could always look after her. So Torminox's mission going for this necklace, what I liked, and how I said in my no spoilers review for the first 6 episodes, I said that this episode would still link in with the grander esque kind of villain plot. And, as I've said, we've got the butts and that problem there, but there does seem to be this larger threat of Immortus and whatever's cooking in the background there. In the end of this episode, after Torminox makes the exchange, because it was quite funny how everyone turned into a freaking cube, he brought Danny back, the Candlemaker back, but he had to get the necklace, and that's because we saw Torminox and Dr. Janice arrive to that person who seemed to be drawing more Space Case comics, which was interesting. And it's revealed that this has all been about Torminox getting back to who he was for Casey. So this just adds more emphasis to those touching moments in the episode where we had Casey try and reach out to her father, just how morally corrupt, suggested that maybe he's not too far gone, and there was like a moment or two where it seems like he did recognize who he was. There was the whole painting that was beautiful of this, almost, again, in reality, it's almost like she's experiencing a memory, albeit she's a comic book character, but since she's come to life, it kind of almost is one in a way. So there was that painting on the wall of him pushing her on the swing. And there are those moments where it's like he does almost come back to himself, and again, there's even more context as to why he said please earlier on in the episode, because this whole mission was to get back to who he was for her. And he says to this other figure saying, are you sure Immortus can help? And this person replies saying, oh yes, when Immortus rises, our pasts will be cleansed. So with whatever Immortus can do for people like Dr. Janice maybe, or Torminox here, he is promising an answer to whatever their problems are, so long as they help provide this immortality juice or some kind of form of immortality that Immortus needs. That character goes on to say that we will have everything we've ever dreamed of, and I assure you, Immortus will rise. So given that we are going to see more of Casey in this season, as Jeremy Carver says, but I think what's really incredible to watch as the season progresses is the nuance she brings to the character as she is more and more enveloped in the natural world. So I'm wondering, and by the way, I don't know, I haven't seen this in the previews that I've had of future episodes up until episode 6. I know we're getting more Casey, but anyway, if we're going to see more of her, I wonder if we're actually going to see maybe another moment between her and her father. Maybe he's going to get back to who he was since he's fulfilled his end of the job through bringing the immortal aspect of Niles' necklace to the followers of Immortus. I'm also wondering now, with Dorothy and Casey going to Cloverton, how can they help out with this threat? Because you would have to think they will be helpful. And also, how is she going to interact with the other characters of the Doom Patrol? I really am looking forward to that. But overall, as I said, I feel like there's not so much specificness I can break down here and there and everywhere in this episode. It was kind of like a, as I said, self-contained story that was more or less fairly straightforward, but I still really enjoyed it nonetheless. I think it still had all the wacky and weirdness of Doom Patrol, despite it being set completely outside the adventure of what happened with the Doom Patrol last episode, with how Rita was being carried in Doom Manor. And it's going to be interesting to see what you guys think, because I know people will still enjoy this episode, but I know I can just predict that some people will be like, but you know, I wanted to see more of the Doom Patrol show. Maybe they could have done it in scenes where you explore this story and then, you know, go back to the Doom Patrol and then go back to this story again. Kind of like how maybe you had Vic's scenes going to his friends, having laser tag amongst that other story, but maybe in the writer's room to achieve this Casey story, of which, if you're a Doom Patrol fan, people have been waiting for this character to come to live action in this show for some time. It's likely they felt to do justice to that, they wanted to do it and dedicate an episode like this. Not to mention as well, it kind of reminds me in the comic book format of how, you know, the Sandman isn't exactly, you know, linear in that story. It can actually jump from various different stories here and there to some things that feel completely self-contained. Kind of like if you've seen the Sandman on Netflix, A Dream of a Thousand Cats and whatnot, or Calliope. Now, I'm not saying the Doom Patrol comics are as, you know, all over the place as that, but it can be sometimes like this, and how you get like a little self-contained thing, like today's episode where we visit Dorothy again, the Denizens, Casey, bringing her to life, the story between her and her father, dealing with actually coming into reality, still providing an emotional punch there amongst all of the bizarre Torminox Doom Patrol wackiness. So yeah, I still really enjoyed myself. We've still got a lot of episodes left in this season. Next episode is a very, very funny one. Don't worry if you weren't a fan as much of, you know, leaving the Doom Patrol aside in this episode. We're going back to them very much next episode with Youth Patrol, and you're probably seeing the trailer on screen right now. Let's just say that the episode title truly does embody what journey these characters are going to go on. If you're a fan of Mark Sheppard, he's back, and I believe, in my opinion, that is probably the funniest content you will see with Mark Sheppard in the entirety of the Doom Patrol show so far, and just with the other characters as well. It's certainly one of those Doom Patrol stories that has all the hallmarks of what you love about Doom Patrol, and it is definitely more getting on to the whole Immortus side of things, especially with the fallout of what happened with Rita at the end of last episode. We're continuing that journey, and it's like, okay, well, why are these people wanting this out of that necklace? What's gonna happen as a result of that? It seems like Rita's aging, so can't wait for you guys to see that one. And I think that more or less wraps up this video. Again, I didn't think I was going to get the opportunity to make it this week. I'm glad I could still spew my thoughts out there, so just looking forward to see what you guys thought of this episode. What's your favorite moment, and any theories that you have going ahead? Would love to read those as well. Like this video if you did enjoy it, Doomies. Maybe consider subscribing if you're brand new to the channel. Would really appreciate that. It helps me grow. Follow me on Twitter. All the other links to other places are in the description down below. But again, thanks for clicking on today's video. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see all of you Doomies in the next video. Goodbye.